Another upgrade from Hot Toys served as an exclusive over to Sideshow from the Spider-Man 2 video game. Only this time, I think there's actually a legitimate reason why you should double dip. Considering that you do actually have the nearly $300 to $310, should you find this at a reasonable, close to MSRP price aftermarket, because like I just mentioned, this is the Advanced Suit 2.0 upgrade of Peter Parker from Spider-Man 2, and as such it was labeled as a Sideshow exclusive, so it's a little hard to come by, and it's all about that exclusivity because they figured, well, they've already kind of covered this suit, only with this time they have to cater to the little nuances and changes that Insomniac brought to the design in-game for that character model. But there's actually a very clear distinction, a huge one actually, that I think kind of merits a little bit of a double dip for anyone who's a hardcore fan of the Insomniac games thus far, and is also going for a complete collection of Marvel Spider-Man, or whether it be any variations of the suits from the games in Hot Toys form. So let's get those notable changes out of the way. As you can see, they're pretty much about the same height, the same build, although I do have just a slight little theory, and I need to emphasize it's a theory, because more often than not, whenever I kind of toss up a theory here on this channel, the comments kind of flare up in some very distinct sort of way, in a way that kind of forgets that I'm calling it a theory. It could be proven right, it could be proven wrong, okay? It's okay to be either right or wrong when it comes to a theory. It's not fact, and I'm not stating this as fact, but I have a theory. Upon inspecting both builds of either of these figures, unless it could be confirmed differently, like I said, by Hot Toys, somebody who works for Hot Toys, somebody who worked on the credits of actually designing this guy, that I think that the bottom part of the physique for this figure is pretty much one-to-one identical to that of the prior one. In terms of the sculpt, in terms of the endoskeleton for the buck underneath, I feel like an awful lot of the musculature, the joints, the proportions are almost one-to-one identical. It's once we get to the top part of the body that I think they made a couple of refinements when it comes to that build. I noticed that he was a little slimmed down in the torso area. He doesn't have as much of a voluptuous chest as far as that extra bit of muscle padding, which to me, I'm not gonna lie, it's a little disappointing because I really do like the slightly buff look. It's more so of an experienced look that he had in that game, considering that he was already Spidey for about 6 years in the first 2018 game. He's now, I think, 7 or 8 years experience when we get to Spider-Man 2. So it's funny because I feel like the physique should be kind of identical, but they did slim down a little bit on the chest, a little bit on the obliques. He is a little bit more cut around the abdominal area, but still, it looks like he was slimmed down a notch, save for the arms. It's once we get to the arms that it looks like they took a little bit of that muscle padding and added it to his biceps, because he is jacked around the arm area, the tricep area, and most notably, like I said, the biceps and the forearms definitely have a little bit of extra musculature happening on that area right on over there. Now, once we get past the much more deeper levels, we then have to tackle the much more cosmetic surface value things, which is obviously going to be the suit itself. The most obvious distinctions are going to be, as you can see here, flipping it back and forth between Advanced Suit 1.0 and Advanced Suit 2.0 is going to be the actual color palette that has been swapped, mainly dictated by Insomniac, who now with a brand new, well, I don't know if it's a brand new engine, but much more tools to their advantage, being able to work on the PlayStation 5, they were able to go for a much more accurate color scheme. Even though, like I already mentioned in not one, but 2 reviews that I've already given this guy, which is why I'm trying my best to not recap an awful lot on the original 1.0, you'll notice that the color scheming was a bit more on the muted side for the blue, and in-game, it was a much more brighter, like red-orange, or damn near flat-out orange for the red parts of the suit. Whereas with 2.0, not only in-game, but also now in Hot Toys form, they go for a much more brighter, saturated blue. Now, the red is a bit brighter in-game, but I gotta be honest, I think they kind of flubbed it a little bit here with Hot Toys, at least on a subjective level. When it comes to color hues, some people might prefer one over the other, but there's just something about the red on this guy that I gotta be honest, it's not bad. It kind of works in terms of making me feel like, okay, yeah, this is the 2.0 version and I can see the cosmetic differences. But if you were to ask me, gun to my head right now, which red I prefer, gotta be honest, in Hot Toys form, kind of prefer the 1.0. And I think it's most notably because in Hot Toys form, they went with a slightly inaccurate look for the red on the 1.0, but it worked in their favor because that's a very solid, very, I don't want to say realistic, but it just kind of fits the Insomnia look. Whereas over here, it goes for a much more apple red that I don't know what it is, but there's just something about it that it just feels kind of flat. I wish it was a little bit more saturated, a bit brighter, because the blue on this guy works. So I kind of wish that we can take the blue of this guy, but then the red of this guy, flip it on over there, and then we have a much more quintessential Insomniac Spidey prior to the release of Spider-Man 3. Once you get past the color palette, you'll notice an awful lot of the other changes to the suit as far as the white parts. You'll notice that the gauntlets and the boots, or most notably the shoes, the little plastic pieces around the shoes, are now overhauled. They have less of a tracksuit feel. The lining, in terms of the accents around the blue areas, most notably around the thighs, the crotch, and the back, you'll notice that it's a bit more, I don't want to say plain, but it's just a bit more simplified, which in my opinion does kind of favor the 2.0 because you have less of those extra like red parts that are on his thighs that to me I thought it was a little bit of overkill on the original suit. So to see that they kind of did away with that is awesome. I just don't know that I'm just a little bit on the fence as far as the compromise to the belt kind of look where you have the little bit of separation there in the middle and then you have the little prongs, I guess you could say, kind of going up right there. But that's mostly a nitpick that I have towards the design, not Hot Toys' fault. They replicated it here. The only thing that I did notice they kind of missed out on, and I feel like it's a fault of them, Insomniac kind of changing the suit up a little bit as they were kind of working on the game up to release, and they didn't necessarily pass on those notes over to Hot Toys, would have to be the little white outlines on the red parts. If you go back and play the game, you'll notice that he has white outlines around the red areas, most notably around the hip area. The belts kind of look to that overall piece down there towards his waist, and then around the white symbol, around the shoulders, he has these white outlines that kind of separate the red from the blue. They're practically missing here in Hot Toys form. They just have like this kind of grayish kind of design to those panels, and it looks like that's something that they didn't really pass on to Hot Toys. Other than that, you'll see that everything else just pretty much gets lifted from the brand new game, and it looks pretty faithful. At that point, it just really matters as far as preference, which suit you kind of vibe with. Like I said, I really wish that we can kind of blend different qualities here in Hot Toys form. The blue from this guy, but the red from this guy. And then probably the shape of the head for this guy versus that one. That's not to, again, say that this one's bad, but it's just a little bit too round for my taste. Even though it still looks pretty accurate to the game, it's just that on a subjective level, kind of prefer the first one, as well as the way that the eyes just look a little bit much more fully realized as opposed to the flat lenses that he's got going on over here. Everything else, however, feels pretty similar, if not damn near identical to the original, especially as far as articulation. I didn't really notice any distinction as far as the joints, and that goes double for, like I said, the bottom part of the body, which kind of reinforces my theory that the bottom part, and most notably around the waist, down to the legs, the ankles, and everything, the joints feel pretty much identical. They bend the exact same way. Of course, that comes with the caveat that the suit is going to be creasing quite notably, but I do feel like they stitched the suit a little better on the 2.0 than they did on the 1.0, because whenever I was bending the joints, there's still creasing happening, but I just feel like less creasing was happening, or the creases would happen, and then once I would flex the joints back into a neutral position, or the limbs or the body parts, whatever, the suit would actually kind of follow suit, pun intended, and actually, get rid of the creases almost on their own, which is pretty remarkable and a nice little improvement over the original. The only area that I noticed I feel is a little different. Hold on. Yeah, don't know if you can kind of hear that. I can definitely hear it, so it might be coming through into the mic. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so very, very interesting. The joints in the torso are pretty much identical except for again, going back to my theory, on the 2.0, it does feel like they decided to ratchetize, quote unquote, the joints or rather the hinges that are inside of the torso, both at the waist and in the mid-torso cut or the mid-torso hinge, versus that of the 1.0. On the 1.0, those joints are still present, but they're just kind of like on a slant or on a form of hinge that doesn't ratchet. It doesn't pop into any kind of directions or places. It just kind of flexes and kind of pushes forward and back. And because of that, I would say that that's actually an improvement on the 2.0 because this means that the suit will not be compromising any kind of static position you put him in, whether it be in a crunching position like he's shooting a web, or if in a flexing position like if you're flexing him towards the back like he's in mid-swing, because the suit won't be yanking on the joint. Whereas over here, since there's no ratcheting happening, the suit will actually start to press the joint back into a neutral position. You get what I'm saying? It's gonna start to revert back to its original way. So that would the ratchetiness actually works on the 2.0's favor. So that's a hefty improvement. It's probably one of the few things in the articulation that has actually been improved from the prior version. But everything else is, I really could not tell any significant difference because the joints are pretty much identical. The wrists, the biceps, the slight little swivel you have on the top shoulder, as well as the extension that still creates a little bit of a crease there up on the shoulder part of the suit. And then, of course, the ball joint on the head that is able to turn 360, as well as be able to move up and down or look up and down, tilt left and right. So overall, I would say that it's very, as far as everything that is included with the 2.0 upgrade, the figure itself is probably the most accurate thing to the original that is under Hot Toys' control. Outside of Hot Toys' control, obviously you're going to have an awful lot of the cosmetic differences that Insomniac prompted for their overhaul of the suit in the game, and that definitely falls on preference. There's no right or wrong answer for that. So naturally, that means that we need to start now looking at the other stuff that doesn't include Spidey, which is going to be, of course, the accessories. And if you guys remember from my recent comparison of Miles Morales with his original suit from the spin-off game in Hot Toys form versus the brand new Spider-Man 2 upgraded suit, you'll notice that the accessories was a major detriment as to why I couldn't 100% recommend you guys picking up the new upgraded suit should you already have the original, or if you are nevertheless going for a completionist or you absolutely need to have that suit, then sure, go for it, but just don't fall into the trap of exclusivity. And for a little while, it seemed like that was following the same steps with Advanced Suit 2.0 Peter Parker here. Because similar to Miles, one of the biggest things that was completely almost identical is, of course, the base. You have the hexagonal base, only this time instead of black, it's blue with a white outline, the symbol and the logo there on the top, and then the plaque on the front saying Advanced Suit 2.0, along with the exact same waist holster and bendy arm to be able to place them either in a static pose or any kind of dynamic pose that you so desire. Then you get the hand accessories. This is, however, where things get a little bit worse than it did with Miles, because similar to Miles, they decided to cut out one of the pairs that were separated, and now they were smartly conjoined or cleverly conjoined into one singular pair, which is of course the fisted hands along with the web holding hands. You'll notice that his fisted hands, which came on the figure out of the box, now has the hole etched into it so that you're able to either use them for fists or use them to hold webs in his hands, unlike with the original where you had separate hands for that case. Outside of that, though, you got, of course, the traditional web shooting hands, the wall crawling hands, the slightly open action hands, and then neutral open hands for the 2.0. Same thing with the 1.0, except, unfortunately, there's a little bit of lost personality over on the 2.0 because on the original, you had these gestating hands that were very specifically designed for certain accessories. They're completely absent over here. You have the peace or bunny ears hand for when he takes his selfies, and then you have a very specific kind of cupping hand or like cup holding hand like this that's specifically designed for some of the gadgets he comes bundled in with, which I'll tackle in a moment right now. But outside of those hands, that's actually a much bigger discrepancy, technically speaking, than what we had with Miles happening. Thankfully, however, unlike the original, taking a page from what works with Miles, he comes with the plates that you could see actually right about right here. The plates that can actually fit on the, and I'm noticing I'm saying actually a lot. I apologize. I'm trying my best to get away from that. But you have the web plates, as I like to call them, where you basically use these to attach them to the web shooting hands. And then with that little hole that is firmly right there in the center, you can then place the web strands, which similar to Miles are the upgraded versions versus the ones that came with the original. And if you guys have been watching the channel enough, you know that I'm practically sick of these web strands. I really am. The two short ones with the bulb, the two long ones that are pretty much straight, the L-shaped one, and then of course the little spray cone that you can attach to some of the long ones at one of the ends to give it a dynamic flair. Whereas over here, the brand new ones that were included with both Miles and Peter here, you have a long kind of curved one with a little bit of extra animated effects happening here in the middle, and then a straight one with a little L shape towards the end to fit into one of his hands. But to me, I just like that they're completely solid white color. They have an animated flair to them that just to me works a whole lot better. If that wasn't enough, you could see that over here on this side that you have the coiled one in case you want to wrap it around one of his hands or his arms. And unlike Miles, Peter's the one that has to go through the gift and curse of the symbiote arc. And as such, Hot Toys decided to abide by providing both white and black web strands. You of course have the two short ones here. I love that I don't know if this was a conscious decision, but nevertheless, I love that they did this. The one with the bulb that you could argue is a bit more benevolent is the one that's in white, and then the one with the very jagged spear at the far end is the one that comes in this coated, very gooey and glistening black kind of aesthetic, and I really, really dig it. Both of these also have the little peg towards the end to fit into his web shooting plates that you can then put on the web shooting hands, and because of that, it just works in the favor of just making this look all the more badass. Same thing goes for my favorite piece of web accessory that came with Miles, only this time they decided to take that favorite one that I had and coat it in the black symbiote texture with the kind of glossy kind of look that really favors to sell that very alien goo-like kind of look. And overall, I really dig the way that the strands kind of coil in and of themselves. And again, it kind of serves as a form of animation with the little prongs and spears. And again, the ones that have the little spear kind of look towards the end of the web strands are the ones that end up being the symbiote strands. And that to me makes all the sense in the world, and I'm glad that Hot Toys abided by that. So that is awesome. Can firmly be pressed via the peg right here into one of his web shooting hands. That is sick. And if that wasn't enough, they included a nice little web accessory, not necessarily to serve as a form of like a shooting accessory, like mid-action, but rather one that you could simply just wrap around one of his arms via the little hooks that he has here towards the bottom and make it look like the symbiote is working its magic to take over. And I just dig this. I really love this accessory. Even with the little pieces here towards the front that kind of looks like an alien hand grabbing on. It's animated, it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's cool, it looks awesome, and I really love this. What I don't love is the spider bot this time around. It's probably the last gadget that I can actually directly reference here as the only thing that was carried on over from the prior one. Only, frankly, I'm probably in the minority with this, but I kind of like the original, the simplicity of the original, the classic look to kind of mimic the original symbol he had on his back to kind of replicate that overall design, but the clean look to the red chrome paint as well as the eyes. But to me, what really worked is the articulated hands, or the articulated legs rather, to be able to make it look like it's in mid-motion. Sure, it's a little on the light side and feels kind of cheap, but just the overall look of it has a very classic feel. I don't know what it is, but the new Spider-Bot I feel is a little bit of a try-hard with the design, especially with the white symbol there on the thorax right there, the white symbol from his chest, or rather on his back, the official Insomniac white spider symbol. I'm sorry, I just feel like that's a little bit too much. And overall, it's not a bad-looking Spider-Bot. It's sculpted and painted decently, but guess what? No articulation. All of these feet or legs are completely static. The thorax doesn't rotate or move. The mid part of the body doesn't necessarily move or kind of flex in any kind of way. The only thing that can faintly move is this little translucent plastic base to be able to kind of tilt it up and down, left and right, side to side. But it's just services as a form of anchor point to get it to stand up. Otherwise, that's really about it for the Spider-Bot. I'm sorry, like I said, I'm probably in the minority with this, but I prefer the original Spider-Bot a little better. And you can kind of get where I'm going with this. The last bit of direct comparison here, rather, that's not a gadget is, of course, the extra eye accessories, which, much like Miles, he only really comes with one, which is going to be this much more narrower expression on his lenses versus the static basic ones that he's got on his person, as opposed to the original, which came with 2 extra pairs, one that is completely open and surprised, which is technically the one that's defaulted here because I personally just think it looks kind of better. So technically the neutral one is down there at the bottom, as well as the much more leering, angry one. So you have 3 total expressions on the original versus just the 2 over here. So you're missing out on a pair. And it's not the only thing that you're missing, because in terms of what you see before you hear that has some kind of interpretation over here, that's really about it. You then get an awful lot more accessories with the original that are completely missing with the 2.0. Most of which are pretty much encapsulated inside of this container, minus Spider Plushie, which you see right there on the far left, but then everything else included in this container, all the nifty little gadgets they decided to toss in. I kind of miss these guys. It's funny because Insomniac looks like they decided to cut them out too, because notably, some of these things are also missing in Spider-Man 2, the video game. The signal trackers, the web bombs, the trip mines, the vulture tracker. Of course, he still has his phone, but they decided to not include it in the Hot Toys version, so the phone is completely gone. And then you have the web shooters, or the variations of the web shooters, to cater to the gadgets that work in favor of the gadgets. And then speaking of the gadgets, are the ones that also work with the different form of hand accessories that are completely missing with Advanced Suit 2.0. So you have all of the gadgetry, some extra hands, and because of those 2 things working with each other, they're sorely missed outside of just the video game, also in Hot Toys form. And if that wasn't enough, 1.0 comes with not only the little spider sense kind of dynamic effect to be able to put into his head to make it look like his spider sense is going off, but he also got this like little web sticker that I have yet to use because I don't like stickers, but it's technically still thrown in there, along with, again, the diorama that I'm not a huge fan of, but hey, if you ever want to take some cool photos and play around with the depth of field, you still got that included in with the original. Nothing like that to be found with the 2.0. Which is actually rather funny, because if there was a Spidey to use verticality and be able to take advantage of that diorama, especially if it's kind of lifting a skyline and you can take dynamic photos with him to take flight in, it would be this guy, because he comes with the web wings, which are decently sculpted and made out of this thin plastic, and they have that opaqueness to them to make it look like it's actual web strands kind of being able to be extended via the web wing apparatus. And they're using these magnets to be able to attach themselves to the side of the body. However, even though they do sell very modestly that image of him flying with the web wings, or rather gliding or falling with style, the magnets themselves aren't necessarily the strongest ones out there. They are a little finicky. I've already knocked them off his body a couple of times while trying to pose him in a variety of ways to take advantage of the wings, so they could have been a little stronger, which is just going to happen with the territory, especially with a very thick suit such as that being added to a Hot Toys. They're going to come off, so you just have to kind of futz with them and play around with them as best as possible if you really want to take advantage of those web wings. The thing is, though, that is not the accessory that I kept foreshadowing earlier in the review, which I should definitely bring up now, because up until this point, I feel like I've been doing a slightly poor job of selling you guys on whether or not you should pick up the 2.0 if you already have the original, because this was a Hot Toys exclusive towards Sideshow, limited quantities, so right now an awful lot of resellers are selling him for a pretty penny. And right now, it looks like an awful lot of you who have had the original, especially with everything else that is included in the package deal, you're pretty much already kind of set. And I would argue, yes, you'd be right, if it wasn't for the final accessory that is not included with this original that they decided to toss in with 2.0. And it's a doozy. Oh, yeah, baby. Oh. If I can get this thing situated here. That's right, it is the mechanical arms. You guys have obviously seen it from the promo pics. I don't know exactly why I was teasing it so much throughout the entirety of this video, but you can finally see that this was honestly it. For the longest time, I was actually on that camp of thinking to myself, oh, we got another Miles, where I'm partially regretting 2.0, but at least now I have both suits, so the collection can feel a little complete, and we have variances in accessories enough for me to be like, okay, I can kind of interswap. I can take the cell phone from the original, put them on the new one, take the symbiote pieces, put them on the old one. But these arms, man, these arms are actually selling me on the idea that if you do manage to come across the 2.0 and you even had the inkling of wanting to pick them up, especially if you did in fact miss on the original, the arms are actually kind of enough to make me go, yeah, I would say get it, because the imagery and the sheer capacity and really shelf presence of these arms really do it justice. They're made out of this plastic that is not necessarily the weightiest, but at the same time, you don't want it to be too weighty, because you can notice that an awful lot of real estate is being taken up here, and you don't want it to be too top heavy. Furthermore, there's an awful lot of really great articulation happening with the arms as far as 1, 2, 3, 4, I want to say 5 joints total. The most ratcheted and very firm one is actually the one that matters the most, which is going to be the one almost at the base. So being able to move all of these different joints, as you can kind of hear right there, they click very satisfyingly into place. Albeit now I kind of touched this and now it's making him just a little top heavy, so that's a bummer. Oh, there you go. There you go. So it's just a matter of dispersing and kind of moving them around. And of course, they can kind of move vertically in place via the peg that fits into his back. So all of these arms right here are very well articulated, very decently painted. I would say I would have preferred just a little bit of additional chrome because they are a bit on the shinier side in game. But the actual paint that they went with, specifically the way that they were able to texturize it in the middle parts here of the actual arms themselves, along with the little blue translucent accents. So you have a little bit going on right here in the middle part, as well as, of course, the translucent little pieces that are actually rather sharp here towards the end of each arm. Really work in favor of selling the brand new upgraded look of the 2.0. And even though they didn't have to do this, I would say maybe a customizer out there, a third party, can kind of, or better yet, take the electricity pieces from Miles, the upgraded suit, and attach them to some of the arms right here to make it look like he's zapping via that ability you have in Spider-Man 2. I already got ideas here for a final B-roll, but you can see that the arms really do it justice as far as selling me like, yeah, okay, now I'm kind of glad that I picked them up because these arms are pretty badass. Like I said, if I had some nitpicks, I would say some added color value as far as the chrome, the shinier chrome, to make them look a little bit more premium. Maybe go for some much more, doesn't necessarily have to be die-cast. I know that that would be a huge expenditure, but maybe just a weightier plastic instead of the slightly light one you got going on right here. I do see this having potential to break in some less than savory hands, you could argue. However, that's not necessarily the main complaint that I do have with the arms, because there is one complaint I have. But frankly, it's not even a complaint on the arms themselves. It's actually how to add them to the figure, because you'll notice that I didn't really talk about too much about the spider symbols, which are very well decorated on the front, but poorly executed on the back. The back area is a smorgasbord of crap that I personally don't like, because they had to acquiesce, so to speak, for the holes that you have to fit the arms into, because you actually have some plastic back there to have the little cylinders or the little pipes to fit the arms into them. So you're going to have either these holes sticking out of his back that will cosmetically look kind of ugly, or you can then take these pieces that were also included on the back part of the package to then flush in and fill in those holes. Unfortunately, I kind of sort of hate these things. I'm sorry, but they're kind of terrible. These little pieces to be able to press into the holes to kind of cover them up, quote unquote. Because yeah, they did a decent job of trying to paint them out and kind of make them look like part of the suit, but they still look pretty ugly when you fit them in. Not only are they bumped out, so they still kind of stand out from the surface of his suit, so they look like it looks like Spidey is cupping. You know that method that a lot of bodybuilders and weightlifters like to do, where they cup to kind of like do something with their muscles or whatever? It looks like Spidey's doing that on his back when you have these pieces kind of added. They're not flush to the body whatsoever. They stand out. They look ugly. And furthermore, they are a bitch to remove from the body itself, to the point where you're going to need some sort of plastic prying tool to remove them. I don't have one at the hand, so I'm going to keep them off. Otherwise, I would have to use like a credit card or something. So far, that's pretty much the makeshift pry tool that I've been using, because if you use anything sharp, you do have the risk of damaging the suit or the figure in its entirety. So these things are atrocious to remove. I'd rather keep them off because I wish that they would have gone with I feel personally there would have been a better way to flush the pieces in to make the back of the suit look a little bit more natural in covering those holes up, because otherwise it either looks ugly with these pieces or without them. I hate these things. So I'd rather either have these things completely off, bare the holes, or fill in those holes with the arms themselves, because they are a showstopper. So much so, in fact, that it kind of reinforces the idea that this was a definitive upgrade versus that of Miles, which is again kind of sad because it kind of mimics the game that Peter is the one to kind of get a few better things, while at the same time Miles is not necessarily treated very equally as a Spider-Man. And it's just really funny that happens both in-game and even in Hot Toys form. But it still manages to speak for itself. The product speaks for itself. The arms really do it justice, because if it wasn't for these arms, I would feel the same sentiment about Peter here as I did Miles, where if you already have the original, because of the way that you have much more going on with the accessories, the suit may have some preferences that speak to you a little bit better than the upgraded suit, and you have already, like I said, spent money on that and you really don't want to double down, I would say you're in good hands. But are you in better arms with the mechanical arms that Advanced Suit 2.0 comes with? Because these things do a decent enough job for me to look at this entry and go, yeah, if you manage to secure a pre-order with some kind of retailer outside of Sideshow to get this guy as close to as MSRP as possible, you frankly sort of won. Because I personally give Advanced Suit 2.0 a solid 8 out of 10. He would be a 9 if this guy didn't exist, or if this guy did exist but he didn't come with all these accessories, and I would feel like this was a much more definitive version or revamp of this guy. But considering that Hot Toys decided to completely omit some of the things that make Insomniac Spidey, most notably the cell phone, the gadgets, all those things right there, or even the different web shooters, and completely forego that for this, yeah, again, you can make the arguments, you can make all these testimonies saying that some of that plastic and expenditure went towards the arms, but that's already within their blueprints. All they have to do is just kind of copy and paste and just add along to it. And of course, the downgrade personally for me on the Spider Bot, as well as the lack of the eyes, the lack of extra hands, gestating hands, etc. At least we got the cool webs that were lifted also from Miles, only this time with the added symbiote touch. I would say this is definitely the better pickup over Miles, but at MSRP. Don't go for those scalper prices. I've already seen this guy listed on Mercari, eBay, Facebook Marketplace for like $5.99, $6.49. Nah, not for that price. I was completely praising the arms just a few minutes ago. At that price, I would say stick with the original, or in the aftermarket, go for the original, because I would probably say you're technically getting a better value as far as price to figure ratio. If you can find this guy for as close to 300 as possible, then there you go. But outside of that, stick with the original 1.0 and really put them, or better yet, go for the 1.0, and if by some miracle somebody's selling the arms by themselves on eBay, then go with that. So what do you guys think of the Advanced Suit 2.0 that Hot Toys decided to churn out? Do you think it's worth the double dip? I personally think that it was, now that I'm firmly happy about the way that the arms came out, the way that they're articulated, and what they add to the figure as far as posability, that shelf presence, again, the dynamic kind of look to him to make him look all the more badass, while at the same time reminding me of some of the cool abilities that you were able to do in Spider-Man 2? Or do you think that this is one of those areas where Hot Toys looks like they're in some testy waters, because even though you're getting the arms, you're losing some accessories, so there's a bit of a compromise that may not speak to every single collector out there? I would say this is definitely a form of dialogue that gets kickstarted by what Hot Toys generated here, and I would like to have it in the comment section below. And while you're down there, make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you did enjoy this video. If you did not, hit the thumbs down, and as always, stay humble. I'll catch you guys later.